Hi, this is Nosferatuesdays, where a horror writer and a scaredy cat discuss the cinematic history of Dracula.
I'm Avishai, the horror writer in question.
And I'm Michal, the scaredy cat. And the movie we're going to be discussing today takes us both forward and backward in time. It is 2000's Shadow of the Vampire.
It made sense, I think, to in our penultimate episode of the season, to both bring us into the 21st century and also right back to where it all began. This is a movie about the making of the original Nosferatu. What really happened? It's entirely true.
Yes. I mean, well, I really enjoyed the combination, honestly. Like the, combination of some familiar faces and also like going back to the beginning and seeing how the 20s were portrayed kind of in the film, but in color because it was like real life. I don't know. Should we give away the twist of this movie?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay, go for it.
This is about F.W. Murnau making 1922's Nosferatu, but what if he cast a literal vampire and Max Schreck was just a cover for the fact that they had hired an actual creepy dude with
fangs and fingernails and all that.
Long acrylics and a thirst for blood and an allergy to sunlight.
So that's the premise of this movie. I actually enjoyed it probably the most of everything we've watched. Like we mentioned that at least I personally found 1931 very funny. Not intentionally though. This was hilarious. The tone of this movie goes all over the place, but probably the first 3 quarters are just laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, no,
in a good way, intentionally.
Yeah, I think it's a genuinely great movie that is both really funny and also it takes itself really seriously. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to sort of laugh at to a point, and then it gets deeply uncomfortable, I think largely on its own terms.
Yes.
In some ways, I think maybe a little not, but it has something on its mind. It's an uncomfortable watch by the end of it, and I would classify it kind of as an art film in a way.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that the star of this film is Willem Dafoe, who, you probably have heard of, and we'll be seeing later today when we finally venture into Nosferatu 2024.
Oh, yes, we are recording this on the morning of December 29th, mm-hmm. and as soon as we put the microphone down, we are heading out the door and seeing Nosferatu.
It's fine, I'm not scared, it's fine. But, I wouldn't have pegged... I guess most of the other actors are pretty, unknown, but I would not have pegged Willem Dafoe to, lead a very niche, indie film in 2000.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a real cast to it.
Oh, no, the actors are great.
Yeah, I mean, we have John Malkovitch, we have Carrie Elways, we have Catherine McCormick, and Willem Dafoe gets an actual Oscar nom for this movie. This movie... So last week we talked about Coppola's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
1992's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
On ice, and that was nominated for Oscars that it won, including Best Costume, Best Makeup. Here we have a nomination for an actor playing a vampire. It is the first, and I believe still the only Oscar nomination for somebody playing a vampire.
Oh. Wow.
And he did not win, but it's quite the thing. And it was also nominated for Best Makeup, but it lost to The Grinch.
2000 was a weird year. but don't worry, it's only gotten less weird since then.
Oh, yeah.
Dafoe is incredible in this movie. I mean, yeah, it's the combination of committing to the bit and yet also allowing it to be hilariously funny. It's so exquisite. It's just, it's a joy to watch. You should, even if you don't want to watch the full movie, just, watch clips of him doing his Nosferatu thing, because it is, sublime.
But I will say, you should probably watch the movie.
Yes, do watch the movie.
Because also, it's not such a time commitment.
No.
It's one of the shorter ones we've watched.
I was actually recommending this to my brother, who is also, not a horror fan, and I'm like, you should really watch this in a double feature with the original. because neither of them are that scary. Neither of them are that long. Obviously, this is longer than the original Nosferatu, but like
by like 10 minutes.
But yeah, it's not like a heavy lift, and they pair. I mean, obviously they should, but like they go so well together.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and you know, it's as fun to sort of compare, like, oh, it's that shot from the classic, as it is to be like, oh, they changed that.
Yeah, exactly.
But
to the point that I actually wished I knew the original like a tiny bit better, so that I could track it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it kind of makes one want to rewatch the original because it reframes it with a new perspective that, again, entirely true, completely accurate,
not at all problematic in any vectors.
Yeah, but this one has a real interesting backstory, I would say. Steven Katz, the writer, just had the idea. So, again, at this point in history, the copies of Nosferatu that are free floating are kind of poor quality, a little fuzzy, a little undercranked. It's easy to kind of believe that the vampire you're watching is real because you're not seeing the seams in the makeup. You're not seeing the bald cap.
And this is pre-Google, pre-Wikipedia. You can't just be like, who was Max Schreck really?
Yeah, which he we'll talk. But he was a man with a career. But Steven Katz had this idea of what if he was a vampire, and so he wrote this script. It's his first screenplay.
I hate that. I mean, good for you, but I hate that.
He took it around town. So Steven Katz, he has a little bit of he's a writer. He had written things that weren't scripts prior to this. He wrote some prose, he wrote some theater. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's what my research has led me to believe. But he wrote this script, took it around town. Everybody passed on it. In his words, it's because studios like to make a vampire movie maybe once a decade, and they were already full up on that. But his agent, who he eventually landed an agent, was also...
This is sounding more and more like a fantasy.
Was also Nick Cage's agent.
Oh!
So,
if you hear any weird noises, we have been joined by the princess dog.
Yeah. We're just going to pet her, and then I'm going to put her down, let her do her thing. Steve Katz's agent knew what Steve Katz would come to learn, which is that Nicolas Cage fucking loves Nosferatu and idolizes Max Schreck and points to him as an inspiration for him points to him as being an inspiration for him becoming an actor in the first place. Mm-hmm. So Nicolas Cage was super in. Nicolas Cage had a production company, Saturn Films, that he had recently started. So he was able to actually just make the movies that maybe other people didn't want to make. He had the clout to do it. He had the mechanisms to do it. Fun fact, if you don't know this, and I think a lot of people do, but just FYI, Nicolas Cage, the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. Mm-hmm. So we have that fun little connection.
Not his real last name.
Not his real last name. A lot of fake names going around.
That's the second pop cultural thing that I've heard that he's been inspired by, because his last name apparently he took from Luke Cage, the Marvel comic character.
That tracks so hard.
Yeah.
And that's also the funniest thing in the world. But yeah, so Nick Cage put it together, and then he had to find a director. Mm-hmm. So he looked for, a bankable director with some credits under his name, some box office successes, just to ease the financiers. And no, he went for the fucking weirdest guy he could find. Elias Merhige made one movie prior to this, one feature. It's called Begotten. Do you know anything about Begotten?
No.
It's an experimental film that is essentially narrativeless.
Okay.
That is kind of an assault.
Uh-huh.
It has no dialogue. In theory, there's a story. I've tried to watch it. Full disclosure, it's really not for me. And I enjoyed Skinamarink, so but it starts off with God disemboweling himself with a straight razor. It's so incredibly strange and kind of an ink blot test in a weird way. And Nick Cage saw this movie and was like, yes.
I feel like Nick Cage is coming clearer and clearer into focus randomly through this podcast.
Nick Cage loves movies, and that includes the artier side of things, which I love. You know, he's not just he's not looking at it from a commercial point of view. He's looking at it from a I want to make art point of view.
Bless him.
And I'm actually really impressed that it panned out for him, because I would not have seen Begotten and thought, yes, this person can do a narrative story and do it as well as he does. But he does. He does a great job. And I gotta say, Steve Katz, really short, list of produced credits. He did some TV. He worked on From the Earth to the Moon. He worked on The Knick. He worked on Manhunt Unabomber. I'm just looking at his credits right now. But he didn't do a lot else. He did have he was hired to do a draft of Interview with a Vampire.
Oh.
It was not used, but it was the draft that excited the director to join that movie, even though the director then said, I'm going to start from scratch from an Anne Rice draft.
That's cool.
And Elias Merhige, he doesn't do a ton after this. He does one feature called Suspect Zero, which I've never heard of. He does a bunch of Marilyn Manson music videos. Mm-hmm. That's kind of it.
I'm starting to wonder if, he was a vampire? And this movie is more confessional.
I mean, he's an interesting guy, and it's interesting reading interviews with him about this movie in particular, because, he has a point of view and it comes through. And when he explains what he's trying to do, it's like, yeah, no, that tracks, But it is funny that both of these filmmakers sort of got involved sort of in non-traditional ways, made this one very accessible movie. Yeah. And then kind of went off and did their own things in sort of semi-obscurity. But in the meantime, you're making a movie produced by Nick Cage, starring John Malkovich, Willem Dafoe, Carrie Elway.
With a major Oscar nomination.
Yeah.
Nothing against costumes or effects or editing or anything like that, but this is the one on the list,
Yeah. No, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. And it's a really interesting movie, so we should probably get to it.
Yeah. Okay. So the first words of this movie both delighted and appalled me. The film opens with a familiar shot of Greta, what's her name?
Schroeder.
Greta Schroeder, the lead actress, playing with a kitten, as she is in the opening scene of Nosferatu 1922. And I think it's Murnau, right?
Yeah, Murnau.
Who's saying, good, or he's saying, nice pussy. And I mean, I was delighted by the fact that there was a cat in the movie. I also was like, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, no, we start off pretty immediately with sort of a dichotomy between the art that we're seeing and what goes into making that art, right?
Also because he's probably talking about Greta to a certain extent.
Yeah, so some interesting points to be made. For in this movie, Greta Schroeder, the character, played as kind of a diva, played as kind of sort of I guess sort of a.
She's lowering herself to participate in film.
Yeah, and she's sort of disliked by the people who work with her. There's resentment there. She's also kind of implied to be really famous, which she was not.
Oh.
The actual Greta Schroeder, relative unknown, did a lot of small work. Never kind of rose to be a star of the German theater or film, but she did a lot of good work, and I can't find any evidence that she was a diva, so this is entirely a fictional character. But similarly, F.W. Murnau in this does not resemble the real F.W. Murnau.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Because he's such a distinct character.
Yeah, well, describe his character in this. How would you describe it?
Werner Herzog times a million. He's kind of the archetypal anything for the shot director, and obviously this is a movie where that can be taken quite literally. Never breaks a sweat except when he's super high on laudanum, and just is thoroughly committed to the art.
Thoroughly committed to the art. He's we are scientists creating a new pioneer. We are scientists creating a new frontier of art and we are achieving immortality, and he's the kind of director who will talk to the actors while filming, sort of dictating their emotions, and thus you can get all the emotion in a single shot.
Right.
And he's always wearing these circular black sunglasses, which I assume were because of all the lights on set.
I think so.
Yeah. Which a lot of the crew wears, but he looks like a mad scientist, and he's very cold. And the real Murnau, by all accounts, was a very kind and sensitive soul.
Aww.
A very sensitive man, which comes through in his art, where as opposed to being a dictator, sort of more of an artiste.
Yeah.
Here he is Werner Herzog.
This is very much like the guy you would brag about working with decades later, but not the guy you enjoyed working with at the time.
Yeah, and here he is filming the opening scene of Nosferatu on a set with Greta Schroeder, who very much does not want to be there. She says theater gives her life, but that machine, that camera, takes it from me, which is such a foreshadowing. And also, the camera has vampire.
Yeah.
And Malkovitch is F.W. Murnau tells her, this is a sacrifice for your art. You are achieving immortality and all that. But Murnau also wants to get out of there because they're filming on sets, and he wants to get real.
Yes. So they, first of all, he takes a little stop in the world of Weimar Germany's cabaret scene. It is implied, well, I guess it's suggested, but not stated that he's gay. But the drug use is explicit.
There is a line when they're walking to a train. They're walking to the train, and he passes by like a male crew member and says, like, "Aren't you too pretty to be working in film?" or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
a little offhand thing.
I feel like if this were made today, it would be a lot more. Yeah, it would dive into that a lot more.
Absolutely.
So they take the train. As is tradition by now, these things vehicles have important names. It's not a boat, but it's a train, and it's called the Charon, like the River of Charon, I'm assuming, or the.
It's the river Styx, right? He's the ferryman.
He's the ferryman. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the ferryman to hell.
However, I completely agree that a German train in 1922 would be called the Charon.
Yes,
because why not?
It makes sense.
It's very much like the Terror, just
Yeah, but just kind of a slight step back. I want to talk about some of our characters here, because we have some real people and some fake people. Real people, including we have Albin Grau, the producer, played here by Udo Kier, who has a lot of horror movie bona fides. He give me 30 seconds, because he was in everything. He was in Blade. He was in Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. He was in Dracula 3000. He was in the Uwe Boll Blood Rain. Uwe Boll, if you're not familiar, infamously terrible filmmaker. But he just has. I'm just scrolling through his filmography right now. Just so much. Fun fact: he did play Dracula in 1974's Blood for Dracula. But this man has worked with filmmakers.
I feel like Hollywood at this point is just like, it's not 6 degrees of Dracula, it's 2 degrees of Dracula.
It's 1 degree. But he worked with Lars von Trier, Gus Van Sant. He worked with Werner Herzog. He worked with Fassbinder. He worked with everybody. So, and still alive. So I'm past tensing him. But, but he's a gem of this world. We have, I believe now goes by Susie Izzard, as Gustav van Wagenheim as Thomas Hutter.
She is phenomenal. Like,
perfect.
So funny. The thing she does with her eyes, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, the actual Gustav was also kind of a B actor and not particularly well known, and wasn't the first person who was wanted for that role, and they kind of play with that a bit. But we mentioned Greta Schroeder, played by Catherine McCormick here. It's worth pointing out that this take on Albin Grau is also pretty different from the real dude, because the real dude, as we talked about, super deep into the occult. He was the one really excited to do a vampire movie. He basically designed Nosferatu. He drew, he illustrated it. He was,
he came up with the Enochian text, right?
Yeah. It was very important to him that this movie happened the way it happens. And here he's kind of the money guy in a way. He's sort of the hype man for Murnau. He's like the greatest filmmaker since Eisenstein. But he's also like, you haven't told us who's playing the vampire, and the financiers are getting anxious. And, you know, he's played a little bit more as the business side of things, where in real life he was a lot more on the creative.
Yeah. Much less artistic. On that note of, investors getting anxious about, who is playing the Count, the first we hear of him is Murnau professing that, like, he is, like, of the Stanislavski school in Russia, and he will only be appearing in full makeup and costume, and also only filming at night.
Yeah, which... we're already departing from Nosferatu because
we discussed at length they had to film the whole thing during the day.
Yeah, so here to make the story work a little bit, you gotta make some adjustments. They mention in this that, like, Max Struck, he worked with Murnau, he was part of the Reinhardt company, which in real life he was.
Oh, okay.
In real life he was. This man did a lot of theater and films. He was a human. He died in the mid late 30s. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But Udo Kier's Albin Grau is like we're getting anxious. I'm gonna have to see this Max Schreck, and Gustav tells him, like, oh well, he told me about him. I don't know why he didn't tell you about him. But yeah, they go to Czechoslovakia, right? They your note says horses.
There aren't a ton of other animals in this movie, but I figure the horses deserve a shout out. They are in a carriage, like pulling the carriage.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame actually that this movie doesn't have any sort of real behind the scenes about the rats.
I know.
I would like some of that.
Yeah.
But
and something about the werewolf.
Oh yeah, the hyena. Yeah. Bring out the hyena. Yeah, no, this if we were making it now, the hyena would be very important to the plot. But the hyena is absent here. But F.W. Murnau gives a big speech en route to their first location shoot.
Mm-hmm. Which seems to be like they're shooting the Hutter's scenes in the inn, but they're like in an actual inn where everyone is like also staying, which is kind of a fun.
Yeah, and give me 1 second here because I want to triple check what it actually was. The inn that they film at on screen is called the Han Budala Inn, which is Turkish, and the translation is the Fool's Inn. And there's crosses everywhere.
Yep.
Which
become an issue in a minute.
Yeah, so Murnau's doing the Herzog thing of we're filming with the locals.
Yep, and they don't need to act; they just need to be because they're local background people. So,
Yeah,
it's very funny to watch like this fairly sophisticated, or at least self-considered sophisticated film crew interacting with this like quote unquote backwards, area of people.
Yeah, I mean, it gets really funny in a moment because they take off the crosses to film, and one of the locals who runs the inn kind of comes out to complain because these are supposed to. She
interrupts the shot,
and Murnau says, "A native has wandered into the frame." Which is it's so funny to me.
But you know what? Do they listen to the locals, Avishai?
Not only do they not listen to the locals, but they are way ahead of not listening to the locals. Because they are traveling with a vial of blood and a ferret in a cage, which Murnau delivers to a man in a hole.
To somebody.
Yeah, because it's the locals are saying, hey, be careful, there are vampires. To which Murnau internally is saying, no shit. Yeah.
And isn't it great? What was interesting about the woman also is that she's like, the crosses aren't decoration. And they're just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we'll put them back. They do not put them back.
No respect because all that matters is the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
All that matters is the movie.
Unfortunately, this oh no, I'm sorry. I'm skipping way ahead. Ignore that. I was going to talk about Wolf being drained upon, but.
Oh, well, okay, so they stay the night at this inn, and cinematographer Wolf is already kind of starting to have a little subplot that we're kind of like not looking totally at. He's being visited at night by something, and nobody.
There's a very strange shot where like it's Murnau, right, who like walks in.
No, I think it's Gustav.
It's Gustav, who's like he's like trying to find his room. He walks into the other guy's room, and he's like, "Oh, sorry," and this guy Wolf is just staring in absolute like rank terror into the camera. And then the camera just follows Gustav.
Yeah, because all these characters are pretty self-absorbed. Like Gustav's not going to notice that.
No.
Wolf, FYI, not a real person. That is a fictional character.
Oh, okay. As far as we know.
Well, yes, they might have covered up some things. Because this movie is accurate to a T.
Yes. So we're starting to film. And we're filming at what is, I guess, Castle Orlock. And, the crew gets to meet Count Orlock for the first time.
It's one of the best introductions to an Orlock in any of these movies.
It really is.
Because they're just meeting him in the context of filming the scene, and they're all so freaked out, and we are in their perspective, right? It's like Gustav is in front of the cameras. They have a bunch of cameras rolling, which is great. Gustav's being coached off screen because it's a silent film, so Murnau narrates while they're recording, and it's hand cranked, which is wonderful. They're just literally rolling the cameras. With
I know the cinematic detail is like wrong in that they are filming at night, but like it feels very accurate. Yeah,
and I had read somewhere that they actually brought Murnau's camera out of a museum for this. I don't believe that for a second.
That seems unlikely.
But it looks real.
Maybe they designed it after it.
But yeah, so Gustav is doing the scene where Hutter meets Orlock, and the door opens and a figure emerges from the shadows, and it's Willem Dafoe in full Orlock regalia, all the buttons.
It is astonishing.
And Gustav kind of looks back at Murnau like,
what?
is this part of the bit? Like, are we still rolling? Like, is this real?
It won't be the last time he does that.
Yeah, like. Everybody's just so freaked out. It's so wonderful. And Schick is just wordless. He's just kind of like beckoning him in.
And of course, Murnau's just like, you follow him. And like, Gustav keeps looking back at the camera.
Like, I don't wanna.
Can I stop? And he's like, you go.
And then they cut, and Schick kind of vanishes a bit. And Albin Grau is so upset because they did set decoration without him. And Murnau's like, look, I went ahead and I did some things. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And apparently, like this kind of framing, like through the door framing, was very was new. It was like a new technique at the time.
Yeah, it's very crossing the threshold, and it's by the way, it's worth noting that whenever we start to film, we'll see the sort of the iris of the frame kind of close in and it turn black and white and grainy. And that does seem to... That happens not just when we're seeing the literal perspective, but sometimes certain parts of the actual narrative when Murnau is in control in a dangerous way.
Right.
Which is interesting. By the way, the film that they shot on here, they shot on a very sort of a high-speed, high-grain film because they wanted the movie to look way older than it actually is.
It does.
Yeah, it's got a real classic
There's
feel.
also, like, camera techniques that look very old. Like, not everyone will be in focus, or, like, the camera will kind of... Like there's one shot a little bit later where they're following characters downstairs, but the camera just kind of, like, stays there, so you're staring at the wall for a second.
Yeah, and part of that is probably budget, but also we're not doing big crane shots. We're not showing off super much. We're doing classical framing.
Yeah. And it's very up close.
So it's time to film an actual scene with Schick. And which scene is it?
So we are, doing the kind of the interior introductions of Orlock to poor Hutter, and they're going over the contract.
And Schick is bungling a little bit. He's looking at the contracts and he says, but this isn't right. And they say, like, just pretend it's a contract. Like, what should it say? Which part of me kind of thought, like, are they showing him the actual like Enochian and he's like, this is misspelled? But he's also like, it's clear that this isn't an actor, right?
Yeah.
Like this is somebody who's...
But he's trying to be an actor.
He is. And he's coached to pick up the pendant that has the image of Greta Schroeder, which I still maintain that in the actual movie it's like a photo.
No,
like,
I think you might be right about that one, but I think
but in this it's a painting.
Yes. It's yeah.
It's funny, we're cutting from the actual footage of Nosferatu to this movie, and it looks like it's cutting from a photo to a painting.
That was the most jarring cut because that was like distinctly different.
Yeah. But he picks it up and he says, but that's Greta Schroeder. Willem Dafoe is so good in this.
So good.
Apparently Steven Katz, when he took the script around, was saying like, you know, it'd be really good if we got Willem Dafoe to do this. And Nicolas Cage wanted to do it when he came on board, but then he heard like, oh, you should do Willem Dafoe. And he's like, ooh, you should do Willem Dafoe. And my God, he has the look, he has the mannerisms. He's doing all these little like creepy little scuttly things with his fingers where he's just like clacking his fingers together. And he's just sort of like gross and obnoxious.
Yeah. And you know, you usually talk about like actors disappearing into a character like not in a comedic way. But this is he's so devoted to being Orlock. And not just Orlock, but an Orlock or whatever, I guess this vampire's name is, who wants to be a star, you know? He continually keeps talking about his death scene. Like he's like so excited to do this incredibly dramatic scene.
Yeah, and he picks up the picture of Greta Schroeder and says, she has a beautiful bosom. and Murnau's like, well, that'll give the lip readers a thrill. Yeah. But then they have to give him his motivation because he's not acting correctly, right? Mm-hmm. And Murnau delegates this to Henrik Galeen, the actual screenwriter of the movie, played here
also,
by...
maybe low-key the hero of the movie?
Kind of, yeah. Played by John Aidan Gillett, who's had a career, not in anything that I had seen, but... You know, character's Jewish, FYI. He says here, like, oh, what is the most desirable thing to you, but the most unobtainable? And Shrek says, the light of the sun. It's like, all right, let's go with that. And so we start to kind of get a sense of method as both an asset and an obstacle,
right? But
in a minor way.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good point.
Murnau reassures his cast and crew that Max Schreck, though a little upsetting, is harmless by saying that his acting style is like lovemaking games. They stop short of anyone being seriously hurt.
Yes.
Which is such a line. And we get this wonderful little scene that's just kind of like one-on-one with Murnau and Schreck, where Murnau's bringing him some blood. Mm-hmm. And Schreck is reading a poem. He's reading Tithonus, which is a poem by Lord Tennyson, based on a character in Greek mythology who is an immortal who can never die but keeps aging.
Oh.
And so we get a little sense of Shrek's internal life and some of his some of the more sympathetic elements about him.
This is really the scene where the character, I mean, no pun intended, but like comes into the light a little bit.
He does. He also quite literally comes into the light, right? He examines a camera and plays footage of the sun on a projector and plays it directly into his eyeball. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, there's a scene very similar to that in Interview with the Vampire, where, you know, the titular vampire gets to watch a movie that shows the sun, and it's like a major thing for him. And I wonder if maybe that's some of Steve Katz's influence.
Oh, interesting.
But here, there's a little bit of a tension between Shrek and Murnau, where Shrek's kind of like, FYI, like, I eat like old men pee, he says. So, like, sometimes all at once, sometimes drop by drop. And he kind of warns that he hasn't eaten in a while and he's going to be hungry and he's going to be voracious.
Yeah, and the idea is very much that Murnau thinks he can control this.
Yeah.
He thinks he can control everything.
Yeah, this is the movie, you know. This is within. There was a concept that we learned in film school when we were taking a class on safety called director immunity, where there is a psychological concept that if you're a director on a set, you start to lose track of the fact that the world is outside of your control. And so let's say you're filming a frame across the street, and then you want to make an adjustment. You might just barrel across the street to go deal with that without realizing, wait, that is actually a street. You might get hit by a car.
That becomes very relevant in like one of the last lines of the film.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think now we get to our favorite scene.
Yes, but although I guess we should say before, Wolf is is deteriorating.
Wolf's having a bad time.
He is having a bad time, and they're all blaming him. So it is extremely blame the victim.
Yeah, Wolf, played by Ronan Vibert, English actor. Don't know a lot about him, but got to give credit where it's due because he does a great job in this.
Yes, he does a great sweaty. Yeah, so we have, of course, the famous scene where Hutter cuts his finger during dinner, except that we learn that this was actually an ad-lib.
By Murnau.
Yeah, because Murnau just kept on directing poor Gustav to saw open this piece of bread toward his palm, and then
but keep his eye on track.
Mm-hmm. And 1 second too late, he's like, "Oh wait, stop!" And then of course,
it's like, "And you're about to cut your finger." He's like, "Oh!" And he cuts his finger, and Murnau has this brief glimmer of a smile that he quickly hides.
Yep.
And then he's like, "Look, Nosferatu, blood!" And then Shrek just immediately just starts vamping on this guy.
Yes, exactly.
And the lights are flickering, and when the lights come up, Shrek is biting Wolf. Just fully in front of everybody. And Gustav's like, "I saw that."
And guess whose fault it is? It's Wolf's fault.
Oh yeah, it's all Wolf's fault. He shouldn't have been filming that closer.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I do love that they stage this like seminal scene as like an accident though. and something that only played out the way it did because the other actor was a vampire.
Yeah, and Shrek just can't keep his cool. And Myrna has this lovely line about like, you know, I'm going to rephrase that because you have this quote here and I think it's a really good line.
Yeah, and he like, you know, he starts to get some flack from the rest of the crew being like, what, you know, what's up with this guy? And he says that, you know, having having Orlock around, or sorry, having Shrek around makes the crew very nervous, and I like that.
It's really fun. And obviously Albin Grau is having all sorts of concerns because they have to send Wolf home, and now they have to get
another photographer.
They have to get another cinematographer, and they have to calm the you know, the financiers. We get this one-on-one scene with Murnau and Shrek.
Oh, it's so good.
That, as one Letterboxd reviewer puts it, is just fully Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski.
They're basically just fighting about the story and about like so it seems like they have signed some kind of contract prior to this, you know, film beginning, like the structure of the film, and Shrek just keeps kind of like bargaining for more people to eat. So
yeah.
He's like,
because in theory, what Murnau gets out of this is a civilized performer who is a vampire because it's real and it's better that way. And in return, Shrek gets immortality and also Greta
Schroeder,
who
doesn't know about this, by the way.
Yeah, but like now Murnau's like, "How dare you destroy my cinematographer? Why not the script, girl?" And Shrek's just like, "I'll eat her later."
Yeah.
Like he has this little line of like, "Did I kill some of your crew? Murnau? I can't remember." Yeah. And every time Murnau keeps sort of like saying like, "You can't do that," like you better stop. Shrek just keeps saying like, "Or else what?"
Yeah, and he keeps giving this like little smile. My favorite line was, "I don't think we need the writer any longer."
To which Murnau says, "As much as I'm loath to admit it, we do need him." But they have some back and forth
and a fight.
Yeah, they have some bouncing around. But Shrek says, "I won't sail." He don't want to get on a boat, but they have to get him on a boat for the boat scenes. Mm-hmm. And Murnau threatens to film a double instead. In
which means he won't get Greta.
Yeah, because he says like well, if you don't get on a boat, then how are you going to get to Bremen to film your scenes with Greta? He's like, there's such a thing as planes, which is such a smart thing. It's like, oh yeah, he is not an idiot.
I kind of wish somebody had been like, can't you fly? Like,
and he has this great little line that's like both threatening and pathos.
Where, yeah, so Murnau's like, you know, like, or I'll, you know, kill you, hurt you, whatever. And he retorts, tell me how you could harm me when even I don't know how I could harm myself.
It's wonderful. And it's so interesting to watch this dramatized, knowing what we know about Herzog and Kinski. Mm-hmm. People who worked together 5 times. Kinski was an uncontrollable monster most of the time. Herzog knew this because, again, 5 times.
Yep.
But it was very important to his art that he filmed this monster genius in this way. And the two were always threatening to kill each other. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of this is directly drawing from that or how much of it is just a happy coincidence.
Once you see it, it's impossible to not see it, whether or not it's an actual influence.
Yeah, it's really quite the thing. Yeah, no, it's great. So they do a little bit of a compromise where they'll film the boat scenes on dry land. Mm-hmm. They build a boat on the castle grounds, and Murnau flies off to Germany to get a new cinematographer. And kind of leaves Schick with the crew. And there's this lovely scene with Albin Grau and Henrik Galeen drinking and shooting the shit that Schick joins.
Yes, and they start to like kind of tease him about being in character all the time and being a method actor. So they start to ask him questions like, as Dracula, how would you answer? And I think the first one is like, when did you become a vampire? And he says like, as Dracula, I wouldn't remember, or something like very evocative like that.
Yeah. Well, they're prodding at him, right? Because they're kind of drunk and they're sort of making fun.
They're down a photographer. They're still waiting for the new guy to come in.
Yeah. They're doing very sort of locker room talk where Albin Grau's talking about ectoplasm and Henrik Galeen's talking about having seen Greta
So I
naked.
guess that is our reference to the occult.
The occult, yeah. It makes Grau sound more like a skeptic because he's like, oh, it looked like seaweed. I hope that's not what it looks like in real life. But, you know, they continue to objectify Greta. Schick wanders in. He's drinking their schnapps. And they're just like, what's, you know, like, where are you from? I can't recall. How long have you been a vampire? I can't recall. And they're like, well, this is no fun. Mm-hmm. It's like, but then they mention Dracula, and he's like, I read that book,
and it made him sad.
It made him sad. Why did it make him sad?
It made him sad because Dracula has no servants.
Dracula has no servants. He's been reduced. Mm-hmm. He has to set food for this interloper, and like, does he even remember how to buy bread or how to choose cheese and wine? Mm-hmm. And it makes him so sad. It's
a very, like, this speech, it could be straight out of the mouth of Herzog's Nosferatu.
Yeah. And it's funny because the way Willem Dafoe plays it is very frank, right? He's not trying to make people feel sorry for him. No. He's just saying what he thinks.
Yeah.
But it's just on its face, you know, like he does, like he seems to think that he can't make other vampires, and he seems to recall that he was never able to, but he knows what happened to him. There was woman. And he gets really worked up, and he drinks a lot, and he eats a passing bat.
Yeah, he just snags a bat out of the air.
And he like wanders off and kills a crew member. And Galeen, I think it was Galeen who says like, what an actor.
Yeah, this like turns them right around on him. They become like fairly big fans, at least at this point.
Yeah, because he's so convincing.
Yeah. Oh man. So
at this point, I believe they bring in the new cinematographer, who
is Cary Elwes.
Cary Elwes of 1992's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula on Ice.
Yes, on
fire. He is playing Fritz Arno Wagner, who is the actual credited cinematographer in Nosferatu.
He also really looks like a Fritz.
He looks like he has a Fritz haircut.
Yeah.
He has a Fritz accent.
Yeah.
The first thing that we see him do, aside from like fly in on a plane and kind of get off and start immediately being like, he's very jockish. Mm-hmm. He's shooting a scene where it's like the locals who are, I guess, chasing Nock, and he wants to like scare them, and so he just fires a gun into the air. And then
make
he's
her
like,
scream.
ooh, I should have shot that in slow motion. And he has to explain what slow motion is.
I love that part.
Yeah. But he feels very cowboy.
Yeah.
He feels very cowboy. And now they're getting ready to film some stuff with Greta Schroeder, who's in town now, and vaguely recalls Fritz. She's like, you seem vaguely familiar. What's your name? And he says, oh, like I'm Fritz. Like, oh, I called you Fritzy. You know. She has 2 dogs with her.
And it's around this time that Galeen kind of starts to figure things out.
Yeah, because he saw Shrek eat a bat, right? And
but Grau did too, and he was not that impressed.
Yeah, which is so the opposite of how it actually would have been. But I guess we're learning the truth now.
Yeah. That's just what they wanted you to think.
Yeah, but Galeen, you know, he starts to think that maybe it's actually a vampire. He finds the casket, but it's empty, and so everyone's like, well, I guess that's that. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, something's weird here. This is the same casket that he had before. Which is the lore we're perpetuating here. And
Murnau's still absent at this point.
Yes.
But Greta's high.
Yeah, this is my least favorite scene.
This feels very... This part feels dated. It probably wouldn't happen quite this way on a modern production. She's high on morphine and thrashing about in ecstasy on her bed. It's sort of, you know, it seems that she got it from Fritz. Mm-hmm. And her boobs are out. Mm-hmm. And the guys come in and they sort of just kind of lock her in.
Yep. They're standing there. Honestly, it comes across more less like they're trying to calm her down and more that they're just enjoying the view.
Yeah, which feels both like a really sort of shrewd satire, but also kind of a cell phone.
Yeah.
Because the point that it's making is kind of really astute. The question is it really intentionally making that point, or is it just talking about itself?
Right.
Because these guys do not care about her. They objectify her, and also they lock her in not for her sake, but for the production.
Right, exactly.
I mean, they don't realize they've saved her life because Shrek wanders in with no joints. He's walking down the stairs, very stiff-legged, and he finds Greta's room, but he can't get in, and it's very upsetting to him.
Yeah, and he tries to get into all the other rooms. But I mean, I think I would say that we are cognizant of the idea that they view Greta as just a body, regardless of this.
Yeah, one of the things that I suspect would be done differently now by somebody with a little bit more perspective and just history about this sort of thing. You probably have more from her perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Because this movie doesn't center her perspective really at all, except for a couple of really minor moments.
She's in the beginning, and then she disappears until she shows up in this inn. And
except for one moment, which we'll talk about later, we are outside of her looking at her. We're not in her point of view. Mm-hmm. So
we also don't get any of the scenes of her sleepwalking or any of her development back in Wismar.
Yeah, Greta is not Ellen.
Yeah.
Greta is being used as an object to portray Ellen, and if Ellen has agency, Greta has none. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
She's not privy to anything. Nobody's telling her anything. The movie kind of resents her a little bit too, as the diva. Mm-hmm. There's sort of an uncomfortable are we supposed to kind of be a little okay with it because she seems not such a pleasant person?
Right.
Which
she doesn't even remember Fritz, really. It's
yeah, she's obnoxious, and so it's oh, it's okay what's going to happen to her, but it's not. And,
yeah.
And so that sort of muddies the point it's trying to make.
Mm-hmm. And then and this is where Galeen confronts Shrek. We don't really see the fallout of this.
Yeah.
But we do see the fallout of Murnau coming back.
Yeah, Murnau is a laudanum addict. Mm-hmm. He is in his room in a stupor with the walls looking very much like the walls of Knock's asylum room, which is I wonder what point we're trying to make here. Drug use in this movie is really interesting because it's escapism, right?
Yes.
It's Murnau has to control everything except for when he needs to get out of a tough situation, and drugs are an escape. And it feels a little bit like a commentary on movies as like we as viewers escaping, but that doesn't mean we're not being damaged.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah, that's I think there's something to that, especially considering Elias Merhige's views on film, because he sees film as a mad modern science with consequences that we're not quite ready for.
Interesting. Well, Murnau does say at one point that he is a scientist.
Yeah, it's a lot about science.
Yeah.
So here he's confronted by Fritz and Grau, and he just tells them everything.
Mm-hmm. He's like, yep, I read a book in college and there's like a vampire, and then I remembered it when I was like thinking about this movie, and then like we went and found him. Basically, he's just like, I found the guy. We made a deal.
There's a deleted subplot.
Is there?
There's a deleted subplot where the person who gives him the book and the idea to make this movie is his cabaret lover, who it turns out is the vampire who made Shrek.
I don't think we needed that.
I don't think we did it either. I get why they cut it. I get why somebody thought that was clever on the page.
Yeah.
But it's a bit much.
Yeah.
But there is a little...
It kind of cuts the mystery.
But there is sort of a little reference to it in this scene where he says, like, I'd forgotten about what I had read about the despotic vampires until she gave me that book. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's a little reference to that. But he talks about how he found Shrek in a monastery, an abandoned monastery, and... he's doing it for science because this captures the reality of the vampire, and in return, he's offered Shrek Greta,
everlasting life, and Greta.
But it's like offering him something he already has and something he doesn't.
Yeah.
And Murnau and Fritz are like, well, we are currently on an island, which, by the way, I don't think they were actually on an island when they were filming, but whatever. The plane is out of fuel.
It actually doesn't make any sense because they should have had the sets back in Berlin where they were filming originally.
Yeah, and so here it's like, how do we explain why they have to go through with this? It's like, because they're on a deserted island. So it's like, they're like, I guess we just kind of have to film the scene.
I mean, what else are you going to do? So poor Greta gets like let out. And this is actually where I feel like the movie has the most sympathy for her.
Yeah. Because
she's very clearly confused. And at that point, everybody else knows what the hell is going on.
Yeah, she notices they're setting up the scene for Ellen's sacrifice, and she notices everybody's really dour, and she says, "Who died?" Mm-hmm. And it's like we're also like, "Oh."
Also, like, did you not notice that this is the only crew remaining?
Yeah, there's like nobody around. Should be pointed out that Shrek has discovered that there is a mechanism to open up these blast doors to let in sunlight.
Yes.
That, like, it's like a weight pulley system. And so he's catching wise that maybe they're not gonna stick to their bargain. But he's so excited to see Greta. He brings her a chair. Mm-hmm. He makes a big show of putting the chair down, but he looks at her like such a lech.
Yep. Yeah, it's like, oh, my meal. My meal is here. It's very like Into the Woods.
Yeah.
There's no possible way to describe how you feel when you're talking to your meal.
Grau says to Greta, like, did you put this makeup on with a broom? They really have no sympathy for her at all.
Absolutely not.
But they're about to film her scene, in which they give her a steak, which is not.
Okay, so I thought this was fascinating because even though in the actual film, she has agency in that she is choosing this mode of her death and to keep, Orlock there to destroy him, she does not have an active agent of that, right? So in this scene, they change things and they give her a stake so that she could theoretically be the one to actively kill Orlock herself. But the scene of the like the Shadow of the Vampire scene so thoroughly strips her of any agency because basically they start to film the scene and then they very stupidly, frankly, whoever set designed that idea they have a mirror right on the edge of the bed, and she looks up and can see that Orlock does not have a reflection.
And you're right; it makes no sense that there be a mirror there because they're filming that.
I know, right? Yeah, it's odd. But anyway, she freaks out, and then they're like, "Oh, fine." Oh, she's freaking out, and then they drug her.
They drug her like the cat in the opening scene,
Yep.
which they mentioned
Yep.
was under laudanum. So she is the cat. And as she's going under, we see from her perspective, she is finally we're in her perspective. She is remembering the things that Murnau told her at the beginning in the style of the black and white film, which represents Murnau's total control.
Yeah.
Where he's saying like it's a sacrifice for your art, and and she realizes what's going on, and she's just passing out.
Yeah, it's a very upsetting scene.
It's
honestly.
it is fully a rape. These movies are that have rape as an undercurrent.
Yes.
An undercurrent, right? I guess that's kind of vampirism in general, but here we are finally seeing the film crew as the vampires.
Right.
Right? Because, like, Shrek, like, his character, like, it's in his nature. Like, you can kind of forgive that. It's like, of course, the vampire's going to vamp.
Right.
But, like, these guys have no excuse.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. And again, the fact that they have chosen to give her a weapon while, like, making it impossible for her to have any actual agency, much less defend herself, even by physically moving, is, like, yeah.
Catherine McCormick plays it so well.
Oh, it's so good.
So they're filming the scene, and he's drinking her blood, and she, and like he falls asleep with his eyes open, like just like on like he's like wine drunk, I guess.
Yep.
And they're just kind of all waiting for him, but then like it's time to film his death scene,
Which he is very excited for.
Which he's very excited for, because he's like, he wants to drink more from her, but they're like, we have to do your death scene first. And he's like, oh, God damn it, okay. And the version of the death scene...
Okay, so interesting, because I read that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I interpreted it, and maybe I needed to watch it again, but like I interpreted it as the mimicking of death was kind of a thrill for him.
I know, I definitely got that as well. I'm just saying that on top of that, there is a moment where he's like, where Murnau's like, wants more, and he's like, go to hell, Murnau. We're doing it now, and he goes to like just drink Greta. But yeah, no, he is achieving a form of death. The version of the death scene that they want to film is so funny to me, because it's like she's asleep, right? And it's like Murnau's like narrating. It's
she's
like
dead at this point.
She's still a little awake because she has to like pick up the steak.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right, and so like Shrek is drinking, and Murnau's like, and then you notice the steak, and she lifts up the steak, and you look betrayed, and I'm like, and like Willem Dafoe is just kind of like doing crazy eyes, and but like she's not gonna like. No. It's such a strange version.
She doesn't have that much motor control.
Yeah, but they keep filming. He does the whole boob grab shadow thing. And then Murnau tries to renege on their deal. Yes,
he tries to get an accurate portrayal, I guess, of what it would be like if a vampire died while exposed to sunlight. But of course, Shrek is ahead of them and has cut the lever that they need to get the sunlight into the space.
Cut the chains.
Yep. That's the word, chain. And then both Fritz and Grau kind of try to attack him. Yeah. It doesn't go well for them.
Yeah, Fritz shoots him. Shrek just says, like, idiot, and just like snaps his neck and like kills Grau.
He, like strangles Grau or something.
Yeah, it's like, Grau tries something, and Murnau just keeps rolling and says, frankly, Count, I find this composition unworkable.
It's incredible.
And it's this great moment where Shrek and Murnau are kind of like finally on the same page.
Yeah.
Because Shrek's looking at him like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And Murnau says this great line.
Which is that if it's not in frame, it's not real.
Yeah, if it's not in the frame, it doesn't exist. Which, by the way, is actual advice the real F.W. Murnau gave to a young Hitchcock.
Oh.
Before Hitchcock was famous, he was visiting one of Murnau's sets, and the advice he was given was if it's not in the frame, it doesn't exist. Which, from an artistic standpoint, is true, right? It's like Scorsese says, if a film is a matter of what's in the frame and what's outside of it.
Right. As a human being, though.
Yeah, but in terms of disregarding the deaths of your cast and crew. Yeah, your set being
screwed with the corpses of your cast and crew because you want to get the shot.
But also in terms of giving Shrek immortality, like, because you are in the frame, you exist.
Right.
Right. You made an observation during this sequence, that Murnau is not blinking.
Yes. we've talked before about how Orlock doesn't blink. He doesn't even close his eyes to sleep, as we see so hilariously here. But like, yeah, I don't. He does blink at certain points in the movie. Definitely when he's like all laudanum up, he's like blinking and whatever. But during this scene, I'm not sure he blinks at all. And certainly once the shit hits the fan and he is like, talking to the only other living / undead person on the set, and he's rolling and rolling and rolling, and his eyes just don't. Yeah.
He's the vampire, sucking the life of his cast and crew.
It's a great performance. It really is.
Yeah. And they do another take.
Yep.
And Shrek just kind of keeps going through the motions and notices a film light and stares into it because it's the sun that he can never have. Mm-hmm. And then who should come to the rescue but Henry Galeen? Hey, the writer!
Hey, the writer saves the day!
The light floods in and Murnau is filming the the death of the vampire and calls him a monkey. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of insults. When they're filming the fake death, Murnau's just fully insulting him to his face, which is so funny because it's like that's like, this isn't you directing. This is actually just how you feel. But here he's calm and he's saying like I'm gonna find the quote real quick because it's like death of centuries, moon chaser, blasphemer, monkey, vase of prehistory, finally to earth and finally born. And
it's played as a very serious scene, and it is, but there's a certain grandiosity to it. I think even as the film like commits to that, you don't necessarily get used to it.
Yeah, obviously you have John Malkovich at his Malkovichiest. But the way that they depict the death of the vampire here is such a cool choice, I think. Right?
Yeah. He like dissolves. Right.
Well, but the film dissolves.
Oh, I'm sorry. The film, you say that.
The film dissolves. We are not seeing a person disintegrate in the sunlight. We are seeing the actual film melt away. Mm-hmm. Because funny enough, like one of the surest ways to destroy film is to burn it. Mm-hmm. So film itself is a vampire. Fun fact, the title for the script was Burned to Light, which is the chemical process of actually making processing film. Cool. And also that's what happens to vampires. But apparently several crew, including Willem Dafoe, misread that as Burn Ed to Light and thought like, who's Ed? And I'm like, I struggle to believe this, but I keep seeing this anecdote.
Yeah.
So they changed the shadow of the vampire because, it's also light and shadow. But yeah, we don't see a special effect of a vampire dying. We see the celluloid melt.
Right.
Murnau keeps filming as the crew comes in. He keeps directing his dead crew. It's like, he has instructions for Fritz, who's dead on the ground. He has instructions for Albin, who's dead on the ground. He asks somebody to pick up the stake as a symbol of all of your failed plans. Mm-hmm. And
then he makes someone pick up an end slate, and he says, "I think we have it."
Yeah, and that's the movie.
Yep, not a humorous end to an otherwise very funny movie.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty sharp satire, aside from some of its own blind spots.
Yeah,
which it pretty clearly has. It has a lot to say about the way we use each other when we make film, and also the way we use each other when we consume film.
Yeah. There might be a conversation to be had about that, about 2024's Nosferatu.
Right, which we are about to go see.
Yes. All right, so before we do that, let's quickly give this a, our scaredy cat rating, my scaredy cat rating, I guess. I would probably give this a 5 scaredy cats, not because it's especially scary, but because it sticks with you, and when it is scary, it is scary.
It gets under your skin.
Yeah.
I think this is the highest scaredy cat rating you get into any of these movies.
Is it?
I think so.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. That kind of works.
Yeah.
And then our Nosferatu rating.
Well, you have Steve Katz.
We have Steve Katz, of course. And we have the representation of Heinrich Galeen.
Right.
As the hero who saves all. Right.
Although at no point does anybody kind of point out that he's Jewish.
No.
He doesn't. he feels almost sort of like kind of unintentional representation. Like, I don't know if they knew.
Right. And I think also part of what like reduces, I mean, obviously we don't have the plague factor, but part of what reduces some of the Nosferatu like sense is that for the most part, the cast and crew are on Orlock's territory. He's a little bit on the island, but even then we really only see him on the set. And it's not like, it doesn't feel invasive. It feels like they have wandered into something that they shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moment where Murnau is arguing with him and says, "I will not allow you to destroy my picture." And Max Schreck says, "This is hardly your picture any longer," because he really dominates it, and he doesn't feel to me like an anti-Semitic stereotype.
No, which is funny because he looks so much like the original.
You know, they didn't give him a hooked nose.
That's true.
They didn't exaggerate him there. He doesn't feel like an anti-Semitic caricature. He feels like Willem Dafoe. Mm-hmm. Exaggerated.
Yeah. Yeah. Having the time of his life.
Apparently going to the bathroom was really difficult with those nails on.
I'm sure that there are people who can affirm that.
Yeah.
Who are not Willem Dafoe. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I need to shout out Susie Izzard again because
so good.
Just the height of comedy, honestly. Incredible.
Yeah, her performance of Gustav getting out of bed and doing the whole big stretch, which is so accurate to the real Gustav in that movie, and then having like, I think it was like, was it Grau and Murnau watching that scene and Murnau being like, yeah, it is what it is.
He's not such a great actor anyway. But then also like as things go on, like his plotline, Gustav's like kind of trails off into kind of nothing, but you see the character getting like more and more done. Like he climbs the ladder of done to its highest.
Yeah, he's
at the end he's basically just smoking while they're filming. It's really funny.
It's really good. I do think that the time is ripe to make Shadow of the Vampire.
I think so. I'd be into this.
Yeah, Werner Herzog hearing about what happened with Murnau and doing the exact same thing in the 70s with his own vampire, the actual Klaus Kinski, but maybe portray Herzog as a sensitive soul.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think we need the Shadow of the Vampire.
I'm down.
Yeah. But do you have anything else that you have to say about this?
No, I mean, other than, this was really my favorite of the movies we watched. I would watch this movie again.
It's really something. And, I will say before we go to see Robert Eggers' version, which we will see shortly, I did watch another remake last night that we're not going to do an episode on, but it's worth pointing out that there was a Nosferatu remake that came out this year. That was an independent production, very low budget, filmed on green screens, a lot of CGI backgrounds, with Doug Jones of, all the fame.
All the things.
right. He's Guillermo del Toro's man.
Of Guillermo del Toro's fame, basically.
Yeah, he is the water in the shape of water. And also very nice person. He plays Count Orlock in it, and I will say that while that movie is not really for me, and I don't think we're going to do an episode about it, Doug Jones is living his best life, doing his performance as Shrek. It's a lot more fluid and alive because that's how Doug Jones goes. That's
how he be.
Yeah. Just wanted to get that a shout out as we go to the higher version. I'm so curious to find out what we both think, but also what you think about what we're going into.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be, I mean, I'm assuming we'll talk about this when we record, but this is going to be the first film that we are both seeing for the first time together.
Yes. We know what to expect because we've seen this movie before in other forms, but we also don't know what to expect, and we're going to be seeing it in a movie theater.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very fun to...
And I'm not allowed to scream because it's an Alamo, so...
You can scream. I dare you to scream. Oh, God. Should we close this one out?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so, Avishai, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on Instagram at Avishai Oddity. That's AVISHAIODDITY. Or on Blue Sky, just under my name.
And I am on also Blue Sky, Ink as Rain, INKASRAIN. Also Instagram, although more of a lurker there. And of course, our amazing editor is Jamie Blumberg. You can find them on at their website, jamberg.me. And I think they're also on Mastodon.
Hell yeah, Jamie.
Yeah. And, all right, how are we going to end this one out? How are we going to close this one out?
Do you have your quote?
No. I like this system of you finding me a quote, actually. Okay.
Oh, you do yours first.
Why him, you monster? Why not the script girl?
Oh, the script girl. I'll eat her later.
Bye.
I think we have it.